know it's such a boring subject, but you guys have to learn this because it's going to be part of the exam. I think it's 50% of the immunology, serology, blood banking questions. And actually, this is my second least favorite subject among all the major subjects that you're going to take because it requires both memorization and critical thinking. So hopefully you guys are critical thinkers because we're going to start now. All right. So, what are the topics for this week's lecture? For this day's lecture, we're going to talk about the RH blood group. We're going to talk about the major blood groups, other major blood groups, and some minor blood group systems that you may not be familiar with during your fourth year. Is it discussed in the fourth year blood banking? I just want to be clear with the class. Is it fourth year first sem, or they changed the curriculum? Did they change it? Third year, fourth year, fourth year first sem. Second sem na kasabay ng internship. Ah, oh, okay. So it was kind of modified because of the I don't know because of the pandemic. So okay, wonderful. So yeah, let's move on. We have to talk about the RH blood group system. All right, this is the second most important blood group system aside from the what do you call this? Aside from the ABO blood group system, and it was named after these types of monkeys. They look sexy, right? I like how she posed. This is a picture that is grabbed from Google Docs. Google Images. It was from, I think, Wikipedia, the main source. I do not take full credit of this picture, so please don't blame me for any of those things. All right? If you encounter anything. Now, what is the clinical significance of the RH blood group system? Basically, it is the primary cause of hemolytic disease of fetus and newborns, and it can also cause hemolytic transfusion reaction. Actually, the discovery of this one happened in 1870s. How did it happen? Basically, all they knew about that one is the ABO blood group system. Okay, remember what we talked about. You are type O, you can donate to everybody. Okay, you can donate to everybody else aside from ABO. Okay. Now, what happened was with the patient was type A. His husband was also um, the patient is female. All right, so I'm drawing her skirt for you, and the husband is also A. Now, take note that this happened in the 1800s. Okay, so this happened in the 1800s. Now, what happened was supposedly their blood groups are matched, right? And you would not expect hemolytic transfusion reactions, correct? We clear, right? We're clear. Traditionally, both of them should have, based on their primitive knowledge of the blood group systems, namely they only had ABO to work with. These two people are a perfect match. Perfect match, kumbaga, right? They're both of them are perfect match. However, what happened was after the transfusion of this blood to her wife, of his blood to her wife, she encountered hemolytic transfusion reaction. Now that is the time when they discovered that there is another blood group system and it is actually reactive to these monkeys' blood cells. Hence the term RH blood group system. Now, what do you call these monkeys in front of you? Can you tell me what are these monkeys? Anybody? Anybody in the chat? Or anybody can unmute themselves? Ay, wala nang mga tao. Galit talaga sila sa akin dahil na-late ako. Ma-extend kasi sila. Ay, ay, nagulat ako. Nagulat ako. Well, alam ko galit ka, pero wag mo akong sigawan. Hindi ka galit. Okay, so rhesus monkeys, all right? Rhesus monkeys. They are actually known as rhesus macaques. All right, you can search them from Google. It's actually they actually have an interesting story. They have been also used a lot by a lot of scientists and researchers for different biological experiments. So they're rhesus macaques. Macaques. All right, so rhesus macaques. So hence the term RH system. Now, another case that happened in the past was that there wasn't any direct transfusion reaction from the mismatch of the patients. What happened was another case occurred wherein let me try to erase my drawings here because I know it's very artistic, but we have to come back to that one. Another reason is because it's clinically significant. It's the cause of HDFN. What is HDFN again? Anybody? Anybody? Yung mga taong hindi galit sa akin. HDFN. Anybody? What's HDFN? You can use Google if you like. HDFN. HDFN, hemolytic disease of newborn, kulang, hemolytic disease of fetus and newborn is the correct terminology. Now, um, let me discuss to you what happened when they first discovered. But again, another peculiar case, or should I say, a mysterious case of hemolytic transfusion reaction happened. So, mystery. What is the mystery that happened in the 1800s? Okay, so there's a lot of history going on, and this is going to apply. This is going to apply in our discussion for today. So what happened was that mother was pregnant of baby A. So baby A is same with mother. So for example, mother is uh, let's go with type A again. Mother is type A. All right. Baby A is baby A is type A. Now, because they don't have any idea what is the RH blood group system, they assume that the baby would live. They assume that the next baby will live, right? Okay. So what happened next is when oh sorry. What happened next was when baby B baby B was born, or baby B was being developed in the is present. So same mother became pregnant with baby B. Baby B was had some sort of problem in vivo in utero. What happened was they tested the baby for several things. Bilirubin was increasing before term, I think 7 months. If I'm not sure about the actual timeline, but usually this occurs at 7 months because this is the time when the babies start to develop their RH blood groups. But yeah, when the baby there's a significant rise in the baby's bilirubin. How did they do it? In cord blood and in utero collection of the blood. So there's a problem with baby too. Now, what is the problem? Because they didn't know that they typed the cord blood and it matches the mother and baby A. All three of them are type A. Because they don't know the RH type of each baby and uh, the mother's the mother's blood RH blood group. They assume that this there wasn't any mismatching in any of their blood groups. So they didn't realize that there was a hemolytic disease occurring, and specifically the hemolytic disease that is occurring is increase in B1. All right. Remember that B1 or the unconjugated bilirubin, is the one that is the marker that you would expect from patients suffering from acute hemolysis. go back to your previous lectures about hematology, and you will see that B1 will increase significantly. Now, how did this happen? Hemolytic disease of newborn occurs when the mother is Rh negative, baby is Rh positive. During birth, the mother will be exposed to fetal blood cells, and therefore, during birth, fetal will be exposed to fetal blood cells, and therefore they will produce anti-Rh. I will not talk about the specific Rh antibodies yet, but for the sake of the discussion, the mother produced anti-D. Anti-D, sir, akala ko ba Rh? Kasi D antigen yung primary antigen natin. So anti-D will be floating in the mother's serum for quite some time. It does not it doesn't have variable expression, and it does not show dosage, and therefore it will react to cells that are present in the patient's in when exposed to Rh positive blood, because mother is Rh negative. So by virtue, they will have an um, antithetical relation. Now, when I say antithetical, antithetical means you will produce antibodies against what? Against the blood group that you don't have. In this case, the mother is anti-D. Mother produces anti-D because she does not have the D antigens. Gets nyo? Na-gets nyo? Kaya siya nag-produce ng anti-D. Now, she became pregnant with baby B, who is also A, A positive, A Rh positive. Now that is a problem. Because anti-D is IgG, sorry, is IgG, what do you think will happen? It will cross the placenta and will kill the RBCs of baby B. Do you get the idea of what happens in patients who have in babies who suffer from HDFN? Clear? Clear, everybody? Clear? Okay. So you get the meaning of antithetical, ha? I'll give you guys an example. Antithetical. Ang pangit na spelling ko. Ay, nasulat ko because I'm using a mouse. So antithetical, if you don't have the antigen, you will produce the corresponding antibody. All right? Clear? For example, you are type A. The antithetical antibody of that one is what? What is your antibody if what's the antibody if your blood type is type A? What antibodies will be circulating in your blood? Zyrine, sabi mo oo. B ano? Kulang. Ang hilig niyo talaga sa kulang. Kayo talaga class. Kayo talaga class. Anti-B. Ayan, wonderful. Kompleto na sila. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much for answering. Now we can move on to the genetics. Which chromosome can RH genes be found? It is in chromosome 1. All right, it's in chromosome 1. Basically, this is the easiest one that you will need to remember. All right, so please be mindful of that one because this is something that's often not discussed in certain discussions in class. All right. Now, let's move on to the other things that needs to be. Sorry. Okay. So next, we're going to move on with the two genes that are responsible for coding Rh antigens. So you have RhAG, okay, and RH. Ay, sorry, not RhAG. Sorry, mamaya pa yung RhAG. Sorry, nagkamali ako. Medyo groggy pa from the party. All right. RhD, capital dito ha. RhCe. we'll talk about RHAG later. All right. So these are the two genes responsible for the coding of RH proteins. All right. And these RH genes have several products. This will be in the next table on our slide. So RHD codes for the D antigen. Okay. The RHCE gene codes for the C, the small c, the big E, and the small e antigen. Now, sir, bakit walang small d? Kasi if you don't have or if you haven't inherited the RHD antigen, you will be a patient who will be phenotyped as D. Now, similar to type O, you have an idea of what it's called. Similar to type O, you basically have H antigens, but there's no type H, correct? Correct, di ba, Zyrene? Correct, no, Zyrene? There's no type H in the ABO blood group system, correct, no? You only have the H antigen. Yes or no? Justin Javier. Yes. Yes, you don't have the H type. Because why? The the O gene or the D gene is basically an inactive gene or an amorph gene. This denotes the absence of the RHD gene, which means you have not inherited any D antigens. All right? And similarly to blood group systems that we discussed earlier, these are inherited codominantly. And you will see later why. Now, true or false, there is a D antigen? No. Okay, so we already answered that one. Um, Now, how are RH genes inherited? They are inherited from both RHD and RHCE genes are inherited from the parents. And one parent, which means one parent contributes one gene. So, for example, mama, mama, papa. Ito na pala yung example ko. So, mama gave you this this haplotype. Haplotype means one half of the phenotype. All right. Then Papa gave you another one. This is another one. Okay. So you basically get this genotype. So when I ask what is the genotype of the patient, you need to answer the correct nomenclature. With the correct nomenclature, it's supposed to be DCE, DCE. All letters are capital. Okay? So DCE, DCE. Clear? Everybody clear? Do I need to discuss further what I mean by codominant expression? Okay? Do I need to explain? Or can I move on? Wala talagang nagsasalita. Naku, takot ata. Naku, natatakot ako. Galit ata talaga sila sa akin. Jovel, galit na talaga kayo sa akin. Hala. Alright. Hala, galit ata talaga sila sa akin. Alright, let's go. Yes po, galit ka sa akin. Oh my God, natatakot ako. Okay, okay, natakot ako. We can move on. Medyo kinabahan ako. Huwag kayo ganyan. Nakakatakot naman eh. Dapat clear tayo. Huwag putol-putol. Alright, next. The antigenic products of RH genes have what biochemical characteristics? Okay, so basically they have what you call a non-glycosylated multi-pass surface protein. All right, ang haba. Ano bang pinagsasabi mo, sir? So basically this is your RBC membrane. All right, this is your RBC membrane. That's the outer side and the inner side. So what does it mean? It is a non-glycosylated multi-pass surface protein. So unlike the ABO system, it is which is a carboxylated or a glycosylated group. This one is mainly made up of proteins. So when I say non-glycosylated, they're made up of proteins, and when I say multi-pass, it passes the RBC membrane like this. All right, and actually it's a 12. Actually, The combination of the RH antigens is actually a 12 pass protein, but you don't need to know that. They don't ask that in the board exam. What you need to know is what it looks like in the perspective of an antibody, because they will act on the epitopic determinants on the RBC membrane. So please be mindful of those of this biochemical characteristics. It's a non-glycosylated multi-pass protein. Medyo nawala tong card na to, so lilipat ko siya. Dapat yan yung dapat yun yung sagot sa true or false kanina. I don't know what happened. Let me discard the colors. So babalik natin siya sa taas. Dapat yan siya sa true or false. Okay? So when you guys get the copy of this one, you will have at least an idea of what I'm saying. All right. Next, codominant expression. How are they? Which means how are they? What type of gene expression they demonstrate codominant expression? All right. Okay. So this is another one. So I've already answered that question for you. What type of gene expression does RH antigens demonstrate? It's codominant expression. All right. Now, RHAG stands for Rhesus associated glycoprotein, and it's designated as 241, CD241. Sir, akala ko ba ano na tayo, blood banking na tayo? Bakit napunta tayo sa clusters of differentiation na naman? Wait lang, chill lang kayo. Kasi may important ano siya, may important what do you call this? This gene has an important implication in our next slides. All right? Now, if there is an abnormality in this RH gene, you will see you will see stomatocytes in the patient's red blood cells. Okay, so it's associated with stomatocytosis. Okay, and I think that's one of the weird things about the RH genes. Now let's move on to the nomenclature system of RH blood groups. All right, so I think you guys are familiar with the, uh-huh, hello. Ay nawala. Sorry. Okay lang, hindi naman ano, hindi naman siya, wala naman akong drawing. So, balik natin, entire screen na nga lang tayo para hindi mawala. Okay na, nakita nyo na? Clear na? Can you see it? Is it okay na? All right, okay. So now, let's move on to the nomenclature systems. All right, so the RH blood group system has four nomenclature systems officially. All right, so officially, we have ISBT, or the International Society of Blood Transfusion. All right, ISBT. We have the Fisher race terminology, which is the conventional way of the RH nomenclature. The Weiner method is the short one, and the Rosenfeld et al. Method is the computer-based one. You'll see later why it's the computer-based one. All right, now theoretical principles for each nomenclature system. So there's theoretical principles. There's no theoretical principle for ISBT. It's just a number based on when the antigen was discovered. So for example, the ABORH system has an ISBT number of 001 because it was the first one that was discovered. Um, for the RH blood group systems, it's ISBT 004. 004. So it's similar to the Dewey Decimal System, okay, but in this case it's more on the numerical. It's a numbering based system based on the discovery. So as scientists or blood immunohematologists discover more blood groups, then that's how they would number the the blood group that they're discovering. All right, now the Fisher race terminology is based on the RH gene. So RH genes results to the inheritance of closely linked alleles. This is what I mentioned earlier, the DCE ones. All right, so DCE. Okay, so DCE. That's basically the nomenclature type. Okay, DCE, DCE, the DCE system, and the Weiner terminology result is based on the theoretical principle that each RH gene results in the coating of agglutinogens. Agglutinogens. All right. this one is the keyword. If it's agglutinogens, you're talking about the Wiener terminology or the Wiener system. All right, which is basically just the same thing because these are basically just single letter codes, namely R, big R, small r, denoted by prime or 1 or 2. Okay, I'll discuss later what is that. The Rosenfeld et al. Terminology is based on the numbering system. So it's basically R 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's basically the letter corresponding to them is the big C, uh, big E, small c, small e, and the. All right. Okay, now let's transcribe ISBT. ISBT stands for, again, International Society of Blood Transfusion. All right, International Society of Blood Transfusion. What are the four-digit numbers for the RS for the RH blood group system? 004. All right. So for ABO-RH, it's for ABO, it's 001. Okay, ABO. Okay, clear? Clear ba, Earl? It's pretty straightforward for the ISBT nomenclature. Now, what are the ISBT number for the following antigens? Gosh, pinahirapan na naman kami ni sir. All right, so always start for RH antigens. They always start with the first three numbers. The first three numbers is 004, and it will apply for the first one. Now, how would I know if it's RHD antigen? You will just add another three digits. That's 001. And then 2, then 3, then 4, and then 5. Okay? Clear? So this is the answer. Okay? Clear? Ay, sobra ng isang no, 0. Sorry. Okay? So this is the answer. Okay? So I arranged it for you guys just so you can remember fully. All right, wonderful. Now, according to the Fisher-Race terminology, what RH antigens have actual antigens and can be recognized by specific antigens? As I mentioned before, these are your 5 antigens. What are those 5 antigens? Big D, big C, big E, small e, and small c. All right. So that's your antigens. Why is there no small d? As I mentioned before, if you don't have the Rh gene, therefore you don't have the Rhd gene, you don't have the big D antigen. The small d antigen means that there is an empty socket, kumbaga. Okay? Clear? The small d. All right. The term antithetical refers to what? Oh, ayan. I mentioned it already. All right. So let's ask somebody from the class. Uh, Jovel. Jovel, are you there? Ay, wala. Okay, let's go with April. Ay, ayan na pala si Jovel. Nag-unmute na pala. Jovel, hello. Are you there on the line? All right. So what do I mean by antithetical? What do I mean by antithetical? All right, wonderful. So I'm just gonna explain to her again what the term antithetical means verbatim, basically. Antithetical means that if you have a specific antigen, you will automatically have the opposite antibody to that particular cell. So if you don't have, so for example, sorry, if you don't have a particular antibody, if you don't have a particular antigen, then obviously you will produce the antibody for that one. Okay, so the absence of a specific antigen denotes the production of the antibody. Hala, namatay yung monitor ko. Nakikita nyo pa yung ano? Nakikita nyo pa yung presentation? Hala, nag-off yung monitor. Ay, ayan na, okay na. Kinabahan ako. Namatay yung monitor bigla. Alright. Medyo nakakalurky. Alright. So next, let's talk about, what's this? Okay. So next, let's talk about this means that each allele, one person cannot inherit in the same gene and the same chromosome. Uh, we'll have so we'll have an antibody for that one. All right, so arrange the gene frequencies of the following. So which one is the most frequent in the general population? Which one is the highest frequency antigen in the general population among the RH antigens? This is a question in the question banks of the board exam. Anybody? Which one is the highest? Let's try to arrange them in order. Anong klaseng D? I told you, be specific. Ay, hindi siya nag-mute. Hindi siya nag-mute, class. Tuloy-tuloy lang ang discussion nila. Alright. Anong klaseng D? What type of D? Big D or small D? Big D, ah. Number one is big D. Alright. Next. Which one is the which one is the second highest frequency antigen in the general population? Small c? Wrong. It's actually small e. Alright. Next. Which one is the third one? Anybody? Alright. Correct. Alright. Next. Which one is the fourth most common? Big C. Very good. Next. The last one is of course number 5. Alright? Mamaya tatanungin ko ulit ha. Hopefully naalala nilang lahat. So tandaan nyo lang yung number no 14532. I don't know. I don't know how to help you out, guys out, but I think one way for you guys to remember is that it's December CE. December CE. I don't know for yeah. So that's my mnemonic for you guys. December CE. All right. So arrange the immunogenicity naman. So immunogenicity naman tayo. D C C big C big E small e. Let's try to arrange the immunogen based on immunogenicity. Which one is the most immunogenic, guys? Anybody? Answer? Big D. All right, this is number one. All right. The next one. Which one is the most antigenic? The second most antigenic? All right. Be specific, ha? Be specific. When we're talking about blood banking, you have to be specific. You have to indicate whether it's a small letter or a big letter. All right. Next. Big E as in egg. Etlog tuloy sasabihin ko. As in egg. Etlog tuloy sasabihin ko. Big E. All right. Wonderful. All right. Next. What is the next one? Big C. All right. Last one is, of course, small e. Are we correct? Let's double check. All right. Wonderful. Everybody's correct. Okay. See. All right. So everybody's correct. Okay. Now, let's talk about the rules of the Wiener terminology. So there's several rules that you need to follow. Basically, R refers to the D antigen. 1 refers to the C antigen. 2 refers to the E antigen. A small r refers to the small d or the absence of the d antigen. Zy refers to the presence of C and E. All right. Now I'll give you guys the blood group of the patient. Okay. I'll give you guys the haplotype of the patient rather, and you're going to try to tell me what is the in the chat. Let's try. This is just an exercise. So please tell me what is the Wiener conversion of this one. So for example, this is your blood group, blood type, or your RH haplotype. Big D, all right? Big D, big C, okay? And then small c, small e. Please convert this to the Wiener system. Anybody can type or can say it. I think it's much better if you tell it to me. I think it's much better. All right, so people say R1, R1. Okay, so that is actually correct. Because why? R1 denotes the presence of a big D. That is clear, right? 2 refers to, ay, sorry. Ay, sorry, sorry. Kamali, tutuloy. Advance na ako mag-isip, sorry. Alright, sorry, sorry. Advance tayo mag-isip. Sorry naman, guys. Ayan. 1 refers to, refers to the patient, refers to letter C, big C. Okay? Eh, paano kung ganito ang binigay ko sa inyo na haplotype? Please convert this to Fisher race. Binaliktad ko. Genotype pala binigay ko, sorry. That is the patient's genotype, RH genotype. Please convert this to the Wiener group, to the Fisher race. DCE, small d, big D, small c, repeated. All right, wonderful. All right, what about this? Are you familiar with this? Convert this to Fisher race. Somebody. R prime. The term is R prime. Anybody still familiar or you lost me? Sir, you lost me. I don't understand na. Na-lurks na ako. R prime. What's R prime, everybody? Anybody from the chat? Wala, nakalimutan na nila. It's the same one. It's the same one as this one. Guys, don't forget So it's D, D, big C, small e, R prime. So if you get two, basically that will have something like this. D, small c, big E. Okay? So please don't forget that there is another term that's there's another modification of the Wiener system. All right? The Wiener system. Now, what about if I told you you can do this? Small r, small r, small r. Now, what is the last na to? What's the what's the Fisher race conversion of this one? Small r, y, small r, y. That is the patient's genotype. Please convert the genotype to Fisher race. Usually that will be the questions in your exams. All right. Good. Good, good, good. Nina is actually uh, familiar with the terminologies. So do I need to explain? Do I need to explain or we need some more practice? Can we move on? Can we move on, guys? I'm asking people. L double prime? Okay, so thank you. So somebody asked a wonderful question. So, gagawin niyo lang pag double prime. So, we have primes, right? Prime 1 refers to this one. It's the same as this one, as 1. Double prime refers to this one. So, for example, you don't have an you have something like that, double prime, this one. Your conversion would be, I will type it in the chat para makita din ng iba. Conversion is like this. Okay? Because it denotes the presence of big E antigens. All right? Gets, Earl? All right. Another example, Earl. We'll try with you another example using the prime method, the one with the prime methods. I want you to answer this for me. This is the one, I'll erase everything para hindi ka ma-confuse. I'll erase everything. Di ba ginawa kong chalkboard ng slides? All right. So this is your practice test. I want you, Earl, to answer this one, huh? What's your answer, Earl? And then I'll give Renalyn Amparo this one. Okay? So we'll come back to that one. Hopefully they will type it in the chat because we're going to move on with the next part of our discussion. Okay? So next, alphanumeric nomenclature of RH blood group is the Rosenfeld et al. Or Rosenfeld slash co-workers. Rosenfeld and co-workers. In some books, it's Rosenfeld and co-workers. Co-workers. Ang pangit talaga ng sulat ko, guys. Okay? So, Rosenfeld and co-workers. Kulang ng S. Okay? Because ang dami nila kasi. So, in the Rosenfeld nomenclature, the absence of an antigen is indicated by a minus sign. Okay? Alright? So, each one corresponds to the Rosenfeld terminology. Alright? So, RH1 is for big D, big C, big E, small c, small e. Alright? Now, what is your blood group? What is the haplotype of the patient if he has RH, RH, sorry, RH1, 2, minus 2, minus 3, minus 4, mm, minus 4, and 5. What is the patient's haplotype? Give me the patient's haplotype. Anybody? Oh, sige, tulungan ko kayo. Patient is in the Fisher race. That patient will have big D, big C, small e. In the Wiener group, it will be what? It will be R, big R, prime, or R1. Okay? Clear? Clear, guys? Now, sir, may tatanong kayo sa akin. Paano, sir, kung nangyari ganito? Paano, sir, kung ganito ang nangyari? Paano, sir, kung ang patient ko ganito ang nangyari? Tatlo yung negative. Pwede ba yun, sir? Tatlo ang negative. Then that would mean that the patient has an abnormal or an absent or an abnormal RH antigen. Why? How would you be able to know that? Because this patient will be typed as something like this: D, C, blank. Alright? Gets nyo? Gets nyo kung bakit hindi pwedeng more than 3? Gets nyo, guys? Clear? Clear, clear, clear? Alright, wonderful. Okay, sir. Kay Earl lang clear. What about kay April Rosero? Clear ba sa'yo? What about kay Ella Villamayor? Okay lang sa'yo. Clear lang sa'yo, girl. Alright. What, teka, nasaan yung lagi kong tinatawag, yung, nasaan na siya? Ay, nandiyan ka pa. John Ilagan, clear ba sa'yo? Alright, clear na clear sa'yo, ha? John Ilagan. Gusto ko, remember last week sabi ko tatawagan kita lagi kapag ka sumasagot yung mga boys and girls. Hindi pwede tayo nagpapatalo John Ilagan, ha? Alright, ayoko natatalo tayo John Ilagan. Alright, hindi to pampubuli John Ilagan, ha? Gusto ko support mo ako sa mga endeavors ko. Alright. Um, what was the answers for your previous questions? Saan na si Earl at saka sino yung tinanong ko kanina isa? Ayan. This one was for somebody else. I think Renalyn Amparo was supposed to answer also. Earl, your answer is R prime, R big R prime, small R prime, and your answer is big D, big C, small E. That is correct. Small D, big C, small E. All right, wonderful. Funda ba? All right, wonderful. Now, si Jan Ilagan. Jan Ilagan, since sumagot yung ibang tao, tas ikaw lang hindi ko tatanong, I will leave you with this one. I will leave you with this patient. Convert this to the Wiener, convert this to Fisher race naman. Convert this to Fisher race. And since gusto ko mas mataas ang level mo kaysa sa kanila, i-convert mo din siya into Rosenfeld et al. All right? So this is your patient's haplotype. Haplotype lang kailangan mo. Okay? Please convert it to Fisher race and Fisher race and the Rosenfeld et al. Rosenfield et al. All right? I'll come back to you later, ha? Diyan Ilagan, ha? Diyan Ilagan. Hindi ka na sumasagot. Natakot ka na ata. Don't be intimidated. If I'm focusing on you, this means that I love you as a parent. Not as a lover, girl. Stop. All right. Let's move on na, guys. Let's move on na. Okay, babalikan kita dyan Ilagan, ha. Gusto ko before tayo umabot dun sa next topic natin, I want you to answer that question for me. So it's part for Rosenfeld et al. Is a terminology used is a terminology applied for commonly for computerized RH genotyping. Okay? And we have to talk about the abnormalities in the RH system. This is a rare RH group characterized by the absence of RH antigens. RH antigens. So what will happen if the patient's RH antigens are absent? So basically, would you say that this blood group is the answer to this question is the patient is RH null or the null phenotype. Now, um, I want somebody to answer because I'm going to I'm going to drink a glass of water. This is your question. You don't have a copy of this slideshow, right? You don't have a copy of this slideshow? No? Okay. I will send it to Miss to your I think to your group. meeting, may kasama pa ba ako dun sa group meeting? Double check ko nga. Gmail. Ay, kasama pa pala ako. Okay, kasama pa pala ako. 164 ata yung gamit ko na ano, email. Okay. So, ayan. So, isi-send ko dun sa ano. Tapos, I have a question for you guys. I need you to ponder and think about this. What's the difference between a person who is RH negative, and RH null? RH null. What's the difference between a person who is RH negative and RH null? Okay? Nagets nyo yung question? Guys? Okay? I'll give you guys 5 minutes to ponder and think about that. Okay? I'm going to start a timer. 5 minutes lang because we already took up what? We took up 45 minutes, and that's not good for your mental health. That's not good for your mental health. So I'm gonna give you guys 5 minutes to ponder and think about the difference between a patient who is RH null and RH negative. Okay? Because by definition, this is a person who is characterized by the absence of RH antigens. Okay? So somebody will in the class will be asked about this question. Don't worry, Jan Ilagan. I am waiting for your answer in the chat for the one that I gave you. All right? Okay. So we're going to talk about it later after 5 minutes. I will come back. You guys see the timer? 5 minutes, huh? Please give me 5 minutes to drink some water. Okay? Okay, so hello, can you guys hear me? Hello, hello, hello. Hello. Okay, okay, sure. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for answering. All right. So, does anybody know the answer to my previous question? What is the difference between null phenotype or RH null versus an RHD patient? Somebody raised their hand. Angela Felipe. All right. Nice to know you. Nice to hear that you're active again. Angela, what's the difference between a patient who is RH null and RH negative? Uh-huh. All right. Okay. Grabe naman sa maka-others. All right. So thank you for answering. That is actually the correct answer. Okay. So now, since you mentioned that one before, can a patient in routine blood tests, I'm going to ask this question in the chat box, and I'm gonna lay it down for somebody to answer later. Can an RH null patient sorry. What is an RH null nulls patient RH type? RH type with routine anti D anti sera. Ayan. Maganda yung question, no? What is the patient's RH type with routine anti-RH, with routine anti-D anti-sera? O, diba? Babalik tayo dun sa discussion natin. Null RH null. RH, sorry, RH, F, RH. Okay, somebody already answered. Almera Mendoza answered RH O. What do you mean O negative? RH type lang tinatanong ko, te. Almera, RH type lang tinatanong ko. It's either positive or negative or whatever your explanation would be. Okay? Hindi kasama yung wala ko kailan ko Almira, kailan ko binanggit ang ano. Ikaw talaga ha, medyo natatakot ako kung ano. Pero okay lang, don't worry Almira. I will not take it against you. Okay. So somebody she said RH neg lang, sir. Okay, so we'll see what are the two types of RH phenotypes. We have two types. We have the silent or the amorph type, and the other one is the regulator type. What's the difference between the two? Um, the silent amorph type is the inheritance of mutated RHC genes. All right, and the regulator type results from the inheritance of RHG genes. So what does that mean? For example, this is your chromosome one. Chromosome 1. I know it looks like cat's paw. Parang paa ng pusa natin, no? Ay, wala ba? Ay, sorry, sorry, sorry. Sorry. Hindi ko pala napindot. Sorry naman. Alright, so for example, this is your... Okay na? Nag-present na? Alright. So for example, ayan yung chromosome 1 mo. Parang paa ng pusa. No? Okay. So chromosome 1 has two pairs, correct? It says here this is the inheritance of mutated RHC genes. Now, let's talk about them let's talk about the normal ones first. So normal one is denoted as here, normal RHC genes. They are present. Ay, sorry, ang pangit ng color. I don't like that. Let's go with a pen. Color yellow denotes the normal RHC gene, RHCE genes. Okay, yellow color, and then another yellow color here. This is normal. Okay, and then the other one is your RHD genes. Okay, so RHD genes. So that's basically that's basically what you are right now if you're RHD positive. Okay, that's what happens to you. Now, suppose that you have what you call the silent amorph type. I will denote it as a blue speck. So abnormality, may abnormality siya. I will color it with this one. So kahit isa lang ang maano mo, meron ka ng abnormal RHC gene. Pero you will not be considered as a person who is an RH null. We will talk about that one later. So you have an abnormal gene here. What is the abnormal gene? RHCE. Remember, yellow ang color natin for RHCE ha. Lagay ko dito para may legend tayo. RHCE. Ito yung legend natin guys ha. Please don't forget. RHCE, RHD, and this one is, the blue one is RHCE abnormal. Lagyan natin ng star. Alright? So, says here the inheritance of homozygous RHC genes. So, means that it has to be homozygous. That one, that previous one that I have for you is a heterozygous one. You're still going to produce C and E genes. However, there will be a decreased production of RHC genes, C and E antigens. Okay? Now, when you have both abnormal inheritance of the mutated or abnormal RHCE genes, that's the time that you won't produce what? You won't produce capital D, capital C, capital E, small e, small c, yeah, small e and small c. Why? Because these two genes can result to abnormal production of Rh proteins. Okay? Now, what about the regulator type? For regulator types, you are going to inherit a completely different game plan. Babalik tayo dun sa normal natin. We're going to come back with the normal one. Okay? We're going to come back with the normal one. For regulator type, there is an abnormality in the whole chromosome 1 itself. And what happens is that the person inherits an extra gene known as RHAG. There will be an insertion of an RHAG in between these two. This will be denoted as color violet. RHAG. Okay? So what do I mean by that, sir? You are going to inherit an RHA gene within the RHC gene. Okay? And what happens is the proteins that are being produced here, it could be homozygous or heterozygous, doesn't matter. Whatever proteins that are being produced here will affect the structure of the RH proteins. Kaya siya regulator type. It has a problem with, the problem is the functionality of the RHCE genes. Nagets nyo yung difference, guys? Now, let's go back to my previous question. Almera said the patient will type RH negative. Is that correct? Is that correct? Actually, guys, When we come back to RH null, what is the definition of RH? This is the rare blood group, the rare RH blood group characterized by the absence of antigens big C, sorry, small c, big E, and big and small e. Now, is she correct or is she wrong? She's actually correct. Why? Because RHD interacts with your, let's denote the violet one as RHD, with your C and E antigens. Okay? That's for example, that is the example. For example, that's the structure of your RH antigen in the surface of your cells. Why? Why would somebody who's null phenotype be typed as somebody as RH negative? Because these patients RH epitopes or anti-D the anti-D will not have other epitopes. All right. So for example, the antibody is added here. This is a normal RH positive patient. It will interact with the structures in the um, RH group. So, for example, meron tayong tinatawag na hypervariable regions. Alright? So an RH antibody or your anti-D needs to interact with the other ones. So without these two, your C and E, depending on whether which one you inherited from your parents, without these two, your antibody will not be able to react with that, and therefore agglutination will not happen. So tama si Almira. Okay? Gets? Gets everybody? You get it now? Hmm? Almira, nagets mo kung bakit RH negative? Tama yung sagot mong RH negative? Gets mo? Ay, wala na si Almira. My gosh. Galit talaga kayo class sa akin. Hindi kayo nagre-react katulad last time. My God, natatakot ako. I think it's because I was late. Alright? Hello? Walang sumasagot. Nag-aalala talaga ako sa inyo guys ha. Alright, so what RBC anomalies are found in the blood films of patients with RH null phenotypes? Um, it's spherocytosis, somatocytosis, and reticulocytosis. Why is there reticulocytosis? Because there's a mild form of anemia in these patients. Okay? Chronically mild form of anemia. So there's consistent destruction of the blood cells as they exit the RBCs, and therefore there's an increased need for the bone marrow to release RBCs in the circulation. Okay? Clear? Alright, so walang sumasagot. Hala, nag-aalala ako sa inyo. Bakit kayo hindi sumasagot? Alright, we're going to talk about the variant group of RH. So this is characterized by a decreased expression of RHD antigens. Okay? So decreased expression. What do you mean by decreased expression, sir? This is now known as your weak D or your DU variant. Okay? So decreased expression, another way for you guys to note this one is weak, mahina. Okay? Weak lang siya. Okay, so what does it look like in the red cells? So for example, suppose you have red cells. Okay, your normal person with RHD. Your normal person with those triangles are your D antigens. Okay, so you're a normal person. That's basically what you look like. Your cells look like. Has a lot of RH antigens or specifically D antigens. Now, in a person who is weak D, they will have smaller numbers lang. Okay? Similar to your A2 groups. Okay, you inherited something that is that is that results to the decreased expression of your cells of your A2. So when does that happen? When does weak D happen? Let's go back to our drawing. So for example, you are a person who has inherited something like this. Okay, you inherited RHCE, you inherited RHD. Both of them are normal, but there's only one. I sorry, mali pala. Um, this one inherited normal. You inherited normal groups of this one, but you're not a person who will. You're not a person who. You're a person who has inherited a heterozygous D inheritance. Okay, heterozygous why? Because there's a D gene, the amorph gene. Okay, the absence of the RHD gene means there will be something that will fill in the void. Hence, that is termed as the D gene. It's non-functional, but it's always there. All right. So there will be a decreased expression because why? You only have one gene with you. Okay. So the products of that one will be weaker, will be lower. Therefore, there will be lower expression of the RH antigens in the RHD antigen in your cell surface. Gets nyo? Kung bakit magiging weak siya? Gets? All right, clear. All right, next. Let's move on to the slide methods for the determination of what is the slide or tube method of a person who is weak D? Anybody? Okay. What is the slide or tube method result of a person with with weak D. So I'm asking you guys the question, what is the RH type of the patient? So if the patient is a known weak D, when you type him with the RH anti-sera or the anti-D anti-sera, RH anti-D anti-sera, what will be his RH type? Anybody can type it on the chat. You can unmute yourself. RH negative, okay. What about let's go back to the drawing. Let's go back to the drawing. Meron pa rin siyang D antigens, 'di ba? Sabi ko. Okay. RH positive sabi nung iba. Meron pa rin siyang D antigens pero yun nga lang weak ang expression. Now, using the slide method, what will be the reaction of anti-D? All right, people said RH positive. April said RH negative. Cyrene said RH negative. Slide method. We're talking about the slide and tube method. Slide slash tube method. Okay, okay, okay. Some people say, okay, everybody answered correctly. No, nobody. Some people answered correctly. Some people answered no. All right. I will answer the question for you. You are weak D. In some cases, you will have what? Let's go back to our review of immunology and serology. All right, so this is your RBCs. Another RBC is here. Another RBC here. Another RBC here. Then I'm going to go and create drawings for you so you guys can imagine. You are weak D, therefore you only have a couple. Okay, couple of RHD antigens here. Okay. So in a normal imagine this person is somebody who is normal D positive. Okay, so that he has a stronger expression, right? Now when we add the RH polyclonal anti-sera, when I say polyclonal, there are two types of immunoglobulin class. It's IgG, IgM. Okay, and sometimes if the manufacturer is being generous, that one will have complement components also, complements also. That's what we mean by RH polyclonal anti-sera. All right. So that's the meaning of RH anti-serum. Now, so uy, maganda ang sagot ni Glyza La Chica. We'll talk about that later. All right. Um, so since this person is normal, he will form agglutination, right? He will form agglutination reaction because there's IgM in the components. All right. So the IgM will be here, here. It will bind to several times. So it has 5 dapat. Baka ma-cancel ako ng mga estudyante. So that's basically what happens, right? Now, suppose the patient is a weak D variant, a weak D variant, or a weak D individual. Okay? So the expression is lower. Ay, nabura yung buong RBC. Nabura yung buong RBC. Ala, nabura ko yung buong RBC. What do you think will happen to the patient? Anybody can answer whilst I'm drawing. You can type, you can say it in the voice, you can use voice chat, don't worry. Any wrong answer, you will not be mocked. Alright, so for example, weak ang expression na yan. What do you think will happen when you add RH anti-serum? Ito na yung antibody ko. Di ba? Ang ganda ng drawing ng antibody, oh. What do you think will happen? Anybody, you can use the chat box. There will be what? A pro-zone effect or a post-zone effect? There will be excess antibodies, and therefore they will just sensitize the cells. Okay? They will just sensitize the cells. They won't really form lattice formation. Okay? They won't really form lattice formation. Now, this person will be marked as what? As a weak D person, and the result will be RH negative. Why? We're talking about slide and tube method. What was the difference between the card method that we mentioned last week? What was the method that we mentioned? What was the difference between the slide slash tube method and the card technique in the ABO system, the gel card technique? Remember your gel card, the one that I showed you, the one that looks like this? It has the ability to determine the strength of the reaction. Okay? It has the ability to determine the strength of the reaction. But since we're talking about this as a slide method, it is much more objective. All right? Some medical technologists, such as you guys, who are not yet experienced in seeing minute differences in the cells that are agglutinated. I'm not saying everybody doesn't know it. It just requires a little bit of experience. Okay? So for example, graduate kayo, dinala ka agad kayo sa blood bank, tapos ang tube method ang ginamit ninyo. Obviously, hindi pa kayo trained, di ba? Automatic ba 'yun? Alam mo na kaagad kung anong itsura? Syempre, you have to be informed as well. You have to know the subtle differences. The ones that you see in the books are not always the same as what you see in the actual practice. So it will be subjective. A more successful way to do a grading system would be the use of a card method. Because why? You have +4, and then it's clearly visible in the reaction vessels. Now, this is confirmed using AIT. What does AIT stand for? IAT pala, sorry, IAT. What does IAT stand for? Does anybody know? All right, indirect antiglobulin test. Now, I'm no longer going to discuss Coombs test here because I suppose it was discussed in your what do you call this? In your previous years, I suppose. Um, but I'll give you guys what's the difference. What's indirect Coombs test? It measures what? In vitro sensitization. In vitro.
Ang pangit ng N ko. In vitro. Which means in glass. Literally, it means, it's literally translated in glass. Now, what happens is, you take the patient's cells, all right? Take the patient's cells. You first react it with, you first sensitize the cells. And how would you sensitize it? Mix it with in this case, you mix it with anti-D. Now, anti-D will sensitize and will bind to the RH antigens. They will not form lattice formation because of the weak D, weak D present, weak D, weak D variant that the patient has. Okay, so they won't produce a lattice formation because there's what you call a prozone effect. There's too much antibody present in the suspension. Okay, now we need to use what you call Coombs reagent, or another name for Coombs reagent is what? Another name for Coombs reagent is anti, what? Anti what? Anybody? Anti-human, anti-human, so ang pangit ng A ko. Anti-human globulin. Alright? Globu. Mali yung spelling ni sir. Anti-human globulin. Alright, so now I'm going to denote it as this one. Yellow naman. Alright, so what do? We use anti-human globulin, which is color yellow. Incubate it at 37. You add anti-human globulin, and it will enhance the reaction because it will cross-link the over it will cross-link the overly abundant IgG molecules. Okay, so this time, do we need to use polyclonal or monoclonal anti-human globulin? Again, I told you the difference between polyclonal. I told you the definition of polyclonal, right? Polyclonal. What's the difference between polyclonal and monoclonal? Polyclonal has what? IgG, IgM, and if your manufacturer is rich, they will add complement components. However, if your reagent is monoclonal, what do you think will be the what do you think will be the contents of your reagent? Oh, poly, madami. Mono, isa lang. So, what do we need? IgM or IgG? It doesn't matter as long as it targets the human globulins. So, it could be either IgG or IgM. But in most laboratories, they use monoclonal IgG anti-human globulin. Why? Because we want to enhance the reaction. We want to enhance the reaction using incubation at 37 degrees Celsius. Okay? So when we increase the reaction at 37 degrees Celsius, it will enhance the reaction and you will definitely form a lattice formation. Okay? Clear? Clear, guys? Very clear? All right. So that is how you confirm your D or weak D negative. A weak D that is considered as a D negative person. Now, malalaman ba natin kaagad kapag ang patient is D negative? Of course not. You will not be able to experience that. So that's the reason why I need you to remember this one. You need to complete the table. Sino sa tingin nyo ang mga may kailangan ng mag-test ng weak D? D negative donor, D negative recipients, D negative babies, D negative mothers. Oh, di ba? Ang sakit sa ulo. It will be asked in the board exam, guys. Mind you, it will be asked in the board exam. Isa-isahin natin. Si donor magbibigay ng blood. Si donor magbibigay ng blood. RBC ang ibibigay niya. RBC ang ibibigay niya. Kailangan ko ba siyang i-test for week D kasi D negative siya? Yes or no? Don't lie to me. Ang lakas makaboy abunda. Yes or no? Yes, Renalyn. Yes, April. Yes, very good. Don't lie to me. Oh, di ba? Okay. Why? Why do we need to test the donors for week D? Can anybody answer? Remember the importance of we're going to come back to our previous slide. The importance of the RH antigens is that they are implicated in what? Hemolytic transfusion reactions, but most importantly, they are implicated in HDFN. So from that idea alone, do you think it's safe to give untested weak D negative donors? Do you think it's safe to give the patient, for example, do you think it's safe to give a patient donors that wasn't tested, weak D negative donors that wasn't tested for weak D to a patient? Do you think it's not? Do you think it's safe? Hindi po. Why? Because there will be a immune response. Anong klaseng immune response? The patient will produce humoral immunity through the form of anti-D. Why? For example, your donor is your recipient is RH negative. Your donor was not tested for weak D, pero weak D pala siya. Magpo-produce ba siya ng antibody? Will the patient produce an antibody? Of course, the patient will produce an antibody because the patient, your recipient, your recipient has no anti has no RH has no RH antigens. Therefore, if your patient is actually weak D, the immune system of that patient will produce anti-D. Okay? And um, the more it stays long the longer it stays in the circulation, the more likely the patient is going to produce, the more likely the patient will produce antibodies, which will result to hemolytic transfusion reactions. Diba? Gets nyo? Why? Because a person na weak D, meron pa rin siyang D antigens. However, there is only a weak response. Gets nyo? Kung bakit? So the correct answer is we have to do weak D testing. Yes. What about D negative recipients? D negative recipients. Do we need to do weak D testing for D negative recipients? This is very important, especially in the Philippines, because in the Philippines we run out of blood so much. Especially now that we have an issue with the Philippine Red Cross. Basically, the president is targeting the chairman of the Red Cross. Okay. So, do we need to do weekly testing for recipients? Guys, is it important? Will it save us money and time? Opo. Somebody said opo. Angela said opo. Alright. So, babalikan natin yung scenario natin kanina. The recipient is typed as D negative. D negative. But in truth, he's weak D. Okay? He was typed as weak D. His original type is weak D. Now the donor is since the donor was typed as weak D, we will give cross match compatible blood. So the donor will be sorry, will give cross match compatible blood. So the patient will receive the negative blood. Now will that patient produce anti-D? Hello, hello, hello. Ayan, hello. Will the patient or will your recipient who is anti D, who is weak D develop anti anti D antibodies? No, right? No, because he has no D antigen. So he will be what? He will not he will just have Rh negative blood in his system. But there won't be any reaction. So this will be what? Yes or no? Don't lie to me. Earl. All right, wonderful. Good. Now, let's move on to the nitty-gritty. Balik tayo sa next part. But remove everything. Baby, D negative baby. Do we need to test for weak D for D negative babies? Yes or no? Yes, okay, that's correct. Why? Because again, if the baby requires blood, if he's actually weak D, and you give him, if you give the babies are generally we can't type for D for babies, and we can't know immediately, especially when they're newborns. So you have to test for weak D immediately. Okay? For mothers, it's extremely important because we want to know if the mother it will develop anti-D. Okay? Similar scenario to to the donor and the recipient. Okay? For D negative babies, it's important because we want to know if he or she is actually D negative. Why? If the baby is weak D positive and the mother is RH negative, what will be the implication? This is the mother, huh? This is the mother, this is the baby. RH negative. But in truth, the baby is weak D. What do you think will be the problem when she gives birth to another baby? Baby 2. What will be the problem? HDFN. Very good. Because this patient has an occult version of the antigen. All right? So that's basically what's going to happen. Mother develops anti-D. Baby number 2 gets attacked by anti-D. Baby dies from HDFN. Sad. I know. Baby dies from HDFN. Sad. Okay? Clear? We can move on. So everyone will be tested for weak T except for our recipients. That's the correct answer. All right? Clear? We can move on. Hello? All right. Okay, so natutulog ba kayo or ano, galit pa rin sa akin? My God, hindi pa rin kayo nakaka-move on? All right. What are the possible mechanisms for weak D variants? So there's several mechanisms for that one. So I mentioned earlier the genetically weak D. All right. We have partial D. What do I mean by partial D? Um, we have the term mosaicism. C-trans is a genetic anomaly. What basically happens in C-trans is, we'll discuss these two first. We'll discuss these two first. Sorry, we'll discuss C-trans first, and then we'll discuss partial D and del phenotype later. So for C-trans, what happens is that, remember those cat paws that I have? What happens is that these genes that the D genes that you develop are in normally if you're a normal person, it will be in the cis group. O di ba? Cis. Parang cisgender person. Ano sinasabi mo sir na cisgender person ka? Kung sinabi kang cisgender person, you are born straight or born biologically male and you are presenting yourself as biologically male as well. If you're a trans person, you are biologically male, but you present yourself as female. Nagets yun yung difference kung bakit cis and trans? Alright, so cis normally ang isang tao. Cis normally ang isang tao na may may D gene. specifically the RHD gene, what happens is that one of the two, or sometimes both, will have the trans gene. Okay? So one of them will be trans. And what happens is that this will not produce normal RHD protein. RHD protein. And ano, what is the RHD protein? The the antigen. The antigen. Okay? So it will not produce, if it's in the trans position, it will not produce that one. So this is a mutation. Actually, this is a variant of genetic weak D, but in weak D, for genetic weak D, it's literally the absence of one of the genes. For C trans, there is an anomaly in the structure of the chromosome 1, specifically the locus, which contains the genetic code for RHD. Okay, clear? Clear tayo sa C-trans? Ella Villamayor, is that correct? Are you clear? You said opo? You're clear? I want to hear your voice, Ella Villamayor. Ella Villamayor, hello? Are you there on the line? Hello, wala talagang nagsasalita. My God, galit talaga sila sa akin. Wala talagang nagsasalita. Earl, ikaw lang kumakausap sa akin. Earl. Earl, ikaw lang hindi galit sa akin, Earl. Ba't parang lahat ng tao galit sa akin? Pati si Jan Ilagan, hindi pa niya sinasagot yung tinanong ko sa kanya. Jan Ilagan, hindi mo pa rin sinasagot yung tinatanong ko. Galit ka din sa akin, Jan Ilagan? Jan Ilagan, hindi mo pa rin sinasagot yung tinatanong ko. Ay, hindi. Anong akala mo, Jan Ilagan? Ba, ay, nako. Ah, sige na. Huwag mo na sagutan kasi meron akong bagong itatanong sa'yo. Don't worry, you will be the first person I will ask next time. Alright? Baka sabihin mo, lagi na lang si ano mga tinatanong ko eh. Alright, so now, the inheritance of only one RHD gene can result to genetically weak type. Yeah, we already discussed it. I even made drawings for you guys. All right. This is a variant RH genotype wherein there is an incomplete D antigen structure in the patient's RBCs. This is your partial D or mosaicism. Bakit ako naglagay ng picture? Why did I put this picture here? What do you think is the problem in this particular picture? Can you help me out here? Um, John Ilagan, what do you think is the problem in the picture? John. John Ilagan, are you on the line? What's the problem with the picture that I'm showing in the presentation? Parang, that is a mosaic. Tingnan mo mabuti. Anong problema niya? May something eh. Oh, call a friend. Call a friend or Tagalog na nga kita kinakausap, hindi na nga ako nag-English. Nakakainis ka. Ano sa tingin mo ang problema ng picture na to? May problema siya. Color? Color ba dyan? Yes, correct. Kulang. 'Di ba? Parang butas-butas. No? So, tingnan nyo guys, oh, wala siyang mukha, wala siyang bibig. Yung hat niya hindi kumpleto. Nakita nyo? So that's partial D. Alright, that's basically the discussion. That's basically the summary of my discussion for partial D. Alright? Now, uh what is the most important partial D category tested in modern blood banks? This is the DVI. I sorry, yeah, DV6, not DVI. It's actually from DV1, D1 to D13, okay? But the most important one in blood banks is the DV6. It's not DVI class ha. When you see DV6 in the cards, it's a category. Why? Because most monoclonal and polyclonal reagents will react to the other categories as positive, while DVI will test negative. Why? What's wrong ba with DVI? Kasi the structure of DVI is like this. For example, this is your RH, and there's normal RH antigen, RHD antigen. Okay? Normal RHD antigen. So your polyclonal reagents will react to this part of the epitope. Okay? So for example, another RH antigen on this side. Okay, another RH antigen on this side. So this is your D antigen. Okay? That's your D antigen. If you're a normal person. In DV6, the problem is there is mosaicism in all of them. But DV6, D6 rather, no, DV6 tuloy ako. DV6 ako ng DV6. In DV6, the reason why we test it is because it will produce a negative reaction because of its partial D status. What do I mean by partial D status? Let me draw it again. So this is supposed to be your normal D antigen. Ay, nabura. So ganon. So ganon yung normal D antigen natin. Okay? Yan. Okay? Lock and key mechanism, the antibody will fit like that. All right? Clear? That's clear, right? That's a normal D antigen. Now suppose you are D3. So for D3, I will denote it as an abnormal one. It will have a structure like this. You see what happens? What's the difference? You see the difference? There's no more antibody antigenic sites or the epitopical sites. Okay? That's the reason why we have D6 cards all the time in the laboratory. And this must be tested with AIT. Why? Because these small ones will only interact with one portion of the immunoglobulin. It will not react, it will not form a lattice formation. It will leave the antibody hanging like this. It has sensitized, but it's not like that. As opposed to a complete one or the other variants of partial D, it will do something like this. Okay? So you get the difference why D6 needs to be tested, and it must be confirmed with. Hello? Ay, nawala ako. Hello? Ayan, am I back? Can you guys hear me? All right. Okay, thank you. This is an extreme form of weak D that is characterized by almost incomplete absence of the antigens. This is now known as your DEL phenotype. Now, let me explain the difference between del phenotype and weak D. Now, in weak D, your problem is that you're producing only um, small amounts of the antigen. But in del phenotype, there's basically little to no antigens. Like it's like that. And the only way to test it is not through IAT, but through adsorption elution testing. Did I explain last week how do we do elution and adsorption and elution? Do you guys still remember what's adsorption and elution? Do I need to discuss it, or you guys already know the difference? You guys already know the principles of adsorption elution testing. Hello, hello. Nobody's answering. Hello, Renalyn, are you familiar? Or do I need to discuss adsorption elution? Huwag kang mahiya. Don't worry. Don't worry. Huwag kang mahiya. Is it okay? All right. Okay. Pero na-remember, okay. So pinapaulit niya. All right. So for adsorption illusion, what we're doing is we do something like this. We do something like this. You have immunoglobulins colored as green. Please refer to the green ones. because your patient is in a normal patient, you will have the antigens present everywhere, right? This is your immunoglobulins. We adsorbed it, and then we do an elution testing. We add an acid that will allow the survival of the RBCs, but in weak interactions, it will detach the immunoglobulins. All right? It will detach the immunoglobulins. Ay, sorry. Maganda pala pag nasa paint kasi madali niyong maintindihan. Paint. Paint tayo. Okay. Cancel this one. Share my screen. Can you guys see paint? Can you guys see paint? All right. Okay, good. All right. So we're going to talk about it this way. You have normal cells, and then we have del phenotypes. Okay? Medyo maganda drawing, no? Kasi clear yung ano. So for normal persons, where's my fill? This is the color of our solution. This is basic. This is normal saline. All right? That's normal saline. Now, when we're doing elution testing, when we're doing elution testing, adsorption first. The first thing that you need to do is adsorption. You have antibodies, of course. And wait, where's the color? Want to increase the size. Okay, and then I'm going to change the color. This is denoted as the antibodies. So your antibodies are going to attach to the normal cells. These are normal cells, ha? This is the one that has an ample amount of RH antigens. Okay? Now, we're gonna wash this with an acid solution that will allow the survival of the cells. And I'm gonna use it as pink. Okay? Because the bonds between the cells and the bonds between the cells and the immunoglobulins are too strong, it will not detach. We're going to add another immunoglobulin, and we're going to see if it will bind to the if it will produce a lattice formation, because the negative result is lattice formation. All right, the negative result for elution or acid elution is a negative, uh, is no interaction. So we're going to add um, anti-human globulin colored by blue. Okay, this one is already washed, because the color is pink na. We centrifuge it, check for lattice formation. Will it form lattice formation? Yes, of course, because there's immunoglobulins attached to the cells. Now, when we're going to talk about uh, the Del phenotype, by definition, what's the definition of the Del phenotype? An extreme form of weak D characterized by an almost complete absence of D antigens, which means it's a weaker form of weak D. Weak na nga siya, lalo pa siya naging weak. Okay? So, we're going to go and do acid elution testing again. This time, your patient is of the Del phenotype, right? I'll delete these two. We're going to get two cells again, all right? Fill it with color, of course, because I love playing with colors. Okay, those are your RBCs. Now, you have low amounts of you have significantly lowered amounts of the D antigen. So like you have like one or two binding sites for this one. It won't have a strong reaction to the immunoglobulins, and therefore it will just leave the immunoglobulins hanging. So the immunoglobulins like this, so it's hanging. There's no place for it to bind to the other sites. There's no place for it to bind to the other site. what we're doing is we're going to wash it again with an acid solution. Okay, we're gonna wash it with an acid solution. This time, this time class, the immunoglobulins will be removed from the equation. Immunoglobulins will be removed from the equation. And when we add anti-human globulin, after adding another batch of normal saline, okay, medyo mahirap, but just imagine it like that. So these things are washed off already. When you add when you add your anti-human globulin, which is colored violet this time, it won't bind to anything. And your positive result of this one is no agglutination. Nagets nyo? Di siya magpo-form ng lattice kasi naalis natin yung immunoglobulins na nakakabit. Now, on a normal individual, it will remain there and it will form a lattice formation or a clot or an agglutination reaction. Gets? Understood? Acid elution or elution techniques. You can use an alkaline solution, but the most common one is acid elution. All right? Hindi illusion ha, hindi ako nagabisaya dito guys ha. Nag-ano lang tayo. Nag-illusion, illusion, hindi illusion. All right? Nagets mo na, Jovel, Zairine, Ella Villamayor? Nagets nyo ha? Because you will need to understand these concepts, especially if you're answering the board exam questions. All right? Now I'm gonna close this one. I'm gonna stop presentation, open my window. Where's my window? To the window. This one, slideshow. All right. So gets Justin Javier. Na gets ba? Did you get it? There's Justin Javier. All right. Wonderful. Pag pina-explain ko sa iyo later mamaya, hopefully ma-understand mo siya ha. Tatandaan ko yung pangalan mo, Justin Javier. All right. This is the extreme form. Yeah, we already know that. That's Del phenotype. We confirmed the Del phenotype with acid elution testing. Now, this weak T variant has a decreased expression of the antigen as well as a structural defect of the T antigen. Weak partial D. Okay? So, weak partial D is basically the combination of weak D plus partial D. Weak na nga siya, tas kulang-kulang pa. Gets? So, it's just a combination of, for example, I've inherited only one chromosome of RHD, and the other one that I inherited is the other one that I inherited is abnormal. It produces it the protein products of that gene produces abnormally incomplete D antigens. So this is known as weak D. And how do we test it? How do we test it? Molecular studies na. Genomic studies na siya. Hindi na siya kaya ng normal laboratory procedures. Alright? Clear? Cool beans? Alright. Let's move on to the RH antibodies. How many minutes have we gone? Okay, so um, we've finished, I think, 55 minutes. I think it's time for a break because people are gonna get tired. I want you guys to learn for 50. I want you to guys. I want the lectures to be cut out into chunks and pieces so you guys remember the principles of each. Because in blood banking, you need to have a little bit of imagination, right? So we're gonna stop. We're gonna stop here. I'm gonna give you guys 5 minutes, and then after we finish the RH group, we're gonna move on with the other antibodies. But yeah, 5 minutes for now, and then after that, a discussion for about 15 minutes or a break of about 15 minutes. This time it's just 5 minutes. Okay? Because I don't want you guys to get overwhelmed with information. Is that okay? Okay, wonderful. All right. Okay, thank you so much. And we'll go with 5 minutes. 5 minute break lang. Okay? Chunks and pieces lang ang i-ano ko sa inyo para hindi kayo ma-overwhelm. I don't want you guys to get stressed. Blood banking is stressful enough as it is, right? Okay, so this is the one. You have a timer. You can do whatever you like. I am going to eat my breakfast. Hello, I'm back. Hey, everybody. How's your 5-minute break? Ay, walang sumagot talaga. Galit talaga sila sa akin. Galit talaga sila sa akin. Justin Javier, galit ka din sa akin? Ah, okay. Oh my God, galit talaga sila sa akin dahil na-late ako. Oh my God, sorry na guys. Grabe naman kayo. Okay, so saan tayo ngayon sa discussion natin sa mosaic kanina, no? Ay, no, sa ano na tayo? RH antibodies na pala. So we're going to continue our discussion about RH antibodies. And sorry, let's remove that picture of that patient. This one. This one. Yeah. Do you guys see the presentation? Okay. All right. So I'm gonna share it. Hindi ko pa kasi na-click. Sorry naman. Sorry ulit. Okay. So yeah. Ayan. Okay na? All right. Thank you. All right. So the predominant immunoglobulin class of RH antibodies. Okay. So what is the predominant immunoglobulin class? So based on our discussion earlier in our previous case, it's implicated in hemolytic transfusion reactions, but most importantly, it's associated with HDFN. So uh, from this idea alone, what do you think will be what information can you extrapolate from this one? It's what? IgG. Dalawa lang naman lagi ang pinag-uusapan pag blood groups eh. Is it IgG or IgM? Right. Let's see the correct answer. Way, yay, wonderful. People answered correctly. Now, how do we acquire RH antibodies? From our discussion earlier, is it naturally occurring? Natural lang ba siya like the ABO blood group system, or do you need to be exposed prior to the effects of HDFN and hemolytic transfusion reactions? O, di ba may mga choices ako? Is it naturally occurring or do you need to be exposed? Sino yung sumagot? Dalawa yung sumagot. Renalyn, what's your answer? Okay. Sino yung nagsabi kanina natural? All right. Let's see who's the correct answer. April, hold on to your seats because it's not natural. You require proper exposure tuloy. Pang ano 'yon, pang photography terminology 'yon. It's prior exposure. All right? Unlike ABO antibodies which are naturally occurring. Okay? Now, in recent years, how many patients of D negative individuals will produce D when exposed to D positive blood? This is a little bit more of memory work, so please don't be confused about the numbers. This is one of the few things that you need to remember in blood banking. It's about 20 to 30% of patients who are hospitalized will develop anti-D. Why 20 to 30%? Most of the patients will get it's supposed to be 0% or should be either 0 or 100%. Why not 0? Because there are some cases where the patient did not get checked for their RH type. If they didn't get checked for their RH type, that's the time when there will be complications prior to preceding the pregnancy. For example, I think it's very common there in the Philippines for women to become pregnant and then they won't seek antenatal care. Is that correct? Is that correct? Am I correct in my assumption? Is it still happening there in the Philippines? Sino na ang may anak sa atin? Don't worry, I won't judge. Wala pa. Sino na ang nag-work sa clinic as a phlebotomist? Wala pa rin. Alright. Okay, Nicole. Nicole, are you either are you a are you what are you what do you what conditions are you? Are you a mother already or are you a person who has worked in the laboratory? You're a mother, right? Now now did you get tested or did you do antenatal screening before you went to before you gave birth? Now, suppose that you got antenatal testing in the Philippines. Is it still common there for some female or some women, pregnant women in general, not to get tested? Is it still common practice? Because when I was there, it's still prevalent that some people will just go to the hospital, pregnant women rather, will just go to the hospital when they're experiencing pain or some problems during their pregnancy. Is it still happening there in the Philippines? It's an interview question. There's no right or wrong answer. Don't worry. Nicole, very okay naman. Okay naman. Okay, what about Glyza? Glyza said Miser. Glyza, why did you say Miser? Un, un, unmute yourself. I want to talk to you guys because there are some. What about those people who are working, who are located in rural areas? All right. Where are you working in Metro Manila or in rural areas? Manila. Ah, you're exposed to a lot of people. Okay. So, is it still common in the Philippines to have pregnant women visit the hospital only when they're suffering from pains or any complaints in their pregnancy, during the course of their pregnancy. Okay, so it's still common there because the country is still suffering from high maternal and child mortality rate, right? Community or community tayo ngayon, pang community, no? All right. So this is the reason why we get 20 to 30%. All right. We don't get 0% of people. We don't get 0% of people who develop anti-D because of cases like this. All right. So we don't get 0% of people. Why? During when the moment you find out you're pregnant, the first thing that your obstetric or gynecologist will do, or obstetric gynecologist will do, or OBGYN will do, is to test for your blood type. Supposed to be ABORH. Okay? Now, if you're one of those patients, or if your patient is one of those people who are in Tulfo who just got pregnant out of wedlock, or out of by accident, quote unquote accident, they may not be informed of the implications of not getting type for RH. Okay? And in the hospital settings, because we have 20 to 30% of patients who develop RH antibodies. The reason why we get to 20 to 30% is that sometimes physicians are able to stop the development of RH antibodies. And what do we use when we want to prevent the development of RH antibodies? This is my question to you guys. In Tagalog, naaagapan. For example, kasi si mother RH negative. RH negative si mother. Si baby RH positive. RH positive. Mother, baby. She got pregnant. She got pregnant once. Okay. And then baby number two is RH positive also. Okay. And the baby's blood cells exited the uterine wall, or reached the uterine wall. Certain amount of blood exited the patient's certain amount of fetal cells exited through the maternal uterus, or maternal blood vessels, which is rich in the uterus as of the moment. That's the time the mother will be exposed, and the antibodies from the mother will trickle down to baby number two. And to prevent that, we want to stop that. We need to use ROGAM. Did people answer ROGAM? Yeah, I saw people answer ROGAM. Kaya, meron tayong 20% na lang because of the development of ROGAM. What is ROGAM? ROGAM is RH, what do you call this? RH antibodies directed towards RH positive groups. Okay, RH positive blood cells. Okay, so this is basically a prophylactic method of preventing the mother from developing antibodies. Okay, so it targets the fetal red cells that are RH positive, and it's faster than the immune system, which means that the the blood that leaked out from from during birth will be removed. Okay, so yeah. Now let's move on to the type of hemolysis that can occur in RH antibodies. Is it intravascular or extravascular? Type in the chat, people. RH antibodies are antibody hemolysis is associated to what? Are intravascular hemolysis or extravascular hemolysis? Intra for John Mediana. Okay. What about the others? Is John Mediana the only person here? Hello? Hello, people. People of the Philippines. Hello, world, and hello, Philippines. Philippines! Intravascular lang? Isa lang? Walang magsasabi ng extravascular? What about the other people? Renalyn Amparo said extravascular po. What about April? What about Nicole? What about, who's the other one? All right, intravascular for Nicole. What about for Glyza? What about for John Ilagan? Ah, taray. John Ilagan, what's your answer? John Ilagan, I'm waiting for your answer. Ayan, capital. Hala, galit ka talaga John Ilagan sa akin. Capital letter talaga lahat. John Ilagan, galit ka yata talaga sa akin. Nararamdaman ko talaga. All right, so a lot of people answered one, two, three, four. A lot of people answered intravascular. Let's see the correct answer. It's extravascular hemolysis. How can I say, now, sir, how will I know? I can't remember all of these things. We have a lot of blood groups to remember. Just remember the predominant blood group, the predominant immunoglobulin. What's the predominant immunoglobulin? It's IgG. All right. If it's IgG, it's capable of sensitization. It's less likely to produce lattice formation, right? Extravascular hemolysis occurs in where? Which organs? The drawing ko para madali ninyong maalala. What? Hoy, hindi yan pancreas. Hoy, hindi yan pancreas, ha? Baka mamaya akalain ninyo pancreas yan. Mukha bang pancreas? Liver, liver, liver. Another organ. Oh, dinodrawing ko na para sa inyo. Oh, may external. Kidney ka dyan. Ganyan ba ang itsura ng kidney? Spleen. Di ba ang kidney dito ang ano? Oh, 'di ba? So those are the organs where extravascular hemolysis occurs. Why would extravascular hemolysis occurs in IgG? Because these cells are sensitized. All right, when they get sensitized, there are macrophages in these cells. In liver cells, what are the macrophages that we have? We have Kupffer cells. These Kupffer cells, we recognize these ones as foreign. Oh my gosh, they have been opsonized by immunoglobulins, and therefore I must eat them. Those are the things that the Kupffer cells will say. Okay, so I don't need to go to the nitty gritty because this will not be asked in the board exam and even in your in your what do you call this in your final exams. But what I need you to remember is that IgG causes sensitization. When sensitized cells when sensitized cells go to the kidney and into the spleen, they undergo what you call extravascular hemolysis. This is the type of hemolysis that is brought about by macrophages. Intravascular hemolysis is predominantly mediated by your IgM. Why? They happen to occur in the bloodstream. The cells themselves are destroyed primarily because IgM will form a lattice and then they will fix complement because they are better complement fixers than IgG. The complement will then activate either the classical or the alternate or the membrane binding complex to destroy the cells, and they will borrow holes and destroy the cells, therefore destroying the RBCs. Is that a clear summary for you guys? Or do I need to repeat what I'm saying? What's the difference between intravascular and extravascular hemolysis? Is it cool? Can I move on? Jan Ilagan, can we move on? All right. Thank you, John Ilagan. What about Renalyn? Did you understand what I just said? What's the difference and how to remember whether or not the Renalyn? Did you understand? Okay, thank you so much, Renalyn, for understanding. Now, oh my gosh, sir, describe the degree of severity of HDFN for the following RH antibodies. Anti-D, is it severe or mild? HDFN, guys, HDFN, is it severe or mild? Nandiyan na ang choices, guys. Anti-D, severe, S. We will denote it by S. Anti-C, is it severe or mild? Anti-small c pala, rather. Anti-small c. Look at how everything is arranged. They're arranged based on their immunogenicity, di ba? So this will be severe as well, and then everything else will be mild. All right? Okay? It's also the prototypical cause of HDFN. When I say prototypical, it is the number one cause, the primal cause of HDFN among all of these. All right? H anti-D is the most severe one. All right, weak D is confirmed with what test? We need to talk about it again. Direct Coombs test. Sorry, indirect Coombs test. It's not direct Coombs test. Erase that. Sorry, we will remove this. I will correct this. I'm terribly sorry. I will correct this. Indirect Coombs test dapat. Okay? Direct Coombs test is done for antenatal screening for babies and mothers. All right, now weak D variants. Weak D variant Del type is typically known as is typically tested with typed as what? Weak D variants are typically typed as RH positive or RH negative. Weak D variants and Del phenotype. They are RH negative. Weak D variant is confirmed by IAT. Okay? Del phenotype is confirmed with adsorption, elution. Hindi illusion ha, hindi ako nagabisaya, diha. Alright? Huwag kalimutan, ha? Okay. Now, let's move on to the other blood group systems. But before that, I will give you guys, what time is it there in the Philippines? 7 o'clock plus 5. Oh, tamang-tama, no? Tamang-tama. Oy, meron pa tayong merienda mamaya. Kasi ganun, ang bait-bait ko ngayon, no? Kasi late ako. Ang bait-bait ko ngayon. I'm sorry, wag kayong magalit talaga sa akin. Ano bang oras na sa Pilipinas? Double check ko lang. Baka mawala ako eh. So ito yung alarm clock natin. I'll put an alarm clock in my computer. So in the Philippines, it's 12:02. Is that correct? Is my timer correct? Okay, so it's 12:02 in the Philippines. So I'm gonna give you guys how many minutes? Let's say 1 minute 1 hour 5 minutes. Is that good? Bait naman, too generous, or 30 minutes lang? I want it to be a unanimous decision between everybody else. Who's the host of this class? Let's ask meeting host. I will ask the reigning meeting host, which is basically your monarch for today. Ella Villamayor, are you there? All right, which one? As the reigning monarch of this class, how many minutes would you like to give? How many hours slash minutes would you like to give your classmates? 1 hour or 1 hour 30 minutes? Sabi nung iba, 1 hour lang? Okay, so 1 hour lang according to your reigning monarch. All right. Okay. Sabi nung iba, buwisit to si Ella. Sabi nung iba. Sabi nung iba. Okay, okay, magalit kay Ella ha. Alright. So tama lang naman, okay lang din yung ano. Actually, I support Ella's answer. Because kung maaga tayo, kung late tayo matatapos, hindi natin matatakil lahat. And then ako ang gagawa ng examinelya nyo. Pag hindi natin natakil lahat, tapos ano, itatanong ko pa rin yon. Nagets nyo? So, at least you will have an idea on some of the topics that we're going to talk about. So, okay. So, 1 hour and 5 minutes na lang. Oh, para may extra ano. Para makapag-rest din si John Ilagan. Kasi binuli ko siya today. Alright? John Ilagan, ha, have a nice day. Have a nice lunch. Earl, Earl, ikaw din. Alright? April, ikaw din. And who else? Hannah, Jovel, Ella. Oh, inisa-isa ko kayo kasi feeling ko galit. Feeling ko kasi talaga galit kayo sa akin. Enna. Enna. Gina Evangelista. She's beautiful. She's perfect. She looks like a model. All right. I'll be back. All right. Ay, somebody. Oh, nakakatuwa naman. Ah. Oh my God. Actually, kaya ako na late kasi nanggaling ako sa birthday party. Sinurprise kasi ako ng mga friends ko. I didn't expect it. So that is one of the reasons why I got left. I got late today. So I apologize if I partied hard, but I went straight to you guys because I love you guys so much. Thank you. All right. Okay, so we have 1 hour and 5 minutes. That is my birthday gift to everybody else who is here. And I'm gonna exit for a while. I'll be back afterwards, okay? Okay, okay.